I do want to ask you about this. Speaking of some underhanded tactics, like what you're doing here is just fun. That's fun. Okay, I understand what you're doing with your sign. But some truly underhanded tactics went down yesterday in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This is underhanded. Vinny, so Adrian Griffin, rookie coach. I'm really old enough to tell you that I covered him. Way back when I was covering the NBA and I was covering the Boston Celtics, Adrian Griffin was on the Celtics. As a matter of fact, I saw Vince Carter kind of hit a buzzer beater. Right? It was like 10, 15 feet away from me. Vince Carter buzzer beater right over Adrian Griffin, who played good defense, but Vince Carter got the better of him. Anyway, great guy. Was even as a player, a coach on the floor, that kind of guy. You talked about him that way. Rookie coach, second best record in the NBA. I'm not saying he was perfect. We know he wasn't. But they fired Adrian Griffin and they replaced him with a consultant that they paired him up with. Hey, brother, you need a mentor. You need a mentor. Let me get you a mentor. Hey, how about Doc Rivers? And, he's not a threat. He's on TV. He's a coach on TV. Like, he's been through it. He's been through Orlando. We did the count, right? Orlando, Boston, the Clippers, Philly, 4-time coach. Now he's in the next phase of his career, broadcasting. How about we bring in this consultant, Doc Rivers, to help you out? And a month later, Doc Rivers is replacing Adrian Griffin. The consultant now has the job. And I'll say it's underhanded, not by Doc, but by the Bucks, because they're kind of floating it out there. I'm reading some of this stuff where they say, oh, well, we had an opportunity to get an upgrade. That math ain't mathing. Doc Rivers was fired in May of 2023. He was fired in May, meaning he was available in May. Adrian Griffin was hired in June, meaning there was a space where you want an upgrade. I could tell you before it even starts. I can tell you that Doc Rivers is an upgrade over Adrian Griffin. Why'd you hire the dude? Doc Rivers was available. Now you change your mind. I think that's a bunch of BS. I don't like the way it went down. I respect Doc as a motivator, as a leader, but something is rotten in Denmark. Something is rotten. What do you think, Vinny?
I think there is a lot to be dissected here. I think from the standpoint of Adrian Griffin, from the standpoint of any coach, here's my thinking, especially if you are a franchise and win now mode. If you're in a franchise and win now mode, you have a very hard sell in hiring a coach who's never coached before. But if you have determined that this coach is not going to help you get to the NBA Finals, at the very least, that's what the Milwaukee Bucks should be trying to get to. They've won one playoff series since winning the NBA title in 2021. One playoff series, right? That was on Mike Budenholzer's watch. He got fired. You don't have time to say, okay, we're going to give you the season. I've seen so many people say, just give them the season. This ain't charity. If you've made the decision, if your players have internally made the decision, this guy ain't it, then you have to move on. It's ugly. Wow. It ain't pretty, all those things. But clearly it was two things. One, Giannis Antetokounmpo was the driving force behind the Adrian Griffin hiring, right? Nick Nurse was supposedly a leader in the clubhouse, and then he was nowhere to be found after that, and then he surfaced in Philadelphia. That to me says, hey man, I don't like this dude. I think we should hire Adrian Griffin. And Giannis being a guy who has threatened, to leave via free agency when his contract was up and you're trying to get him to sign an extension so he can hang around. And then shortly after you hire the coach, he signs his extension. Yeah, if we're playing a game of Clue, I know who did it. Yeah. I know what weapon was used. Okay. But Amen. Just because that was the case, doesn't mean that you as an organization have to be completely tied to it. And because after a 30-13 mark or whatever the record was, and we have all this evidence over the past couple of months, we've been hearing stuff about Adrian Griffin and his job being in jeopardy almost since the first month of the season, which is very, very, very rare. So that points to me and says that the organization was not fully behind him to begin with, that pretty much maybe Giannis in the locker room initially was, and then things started to crumble a little bit. And it's not a situation like Joe Mazzulla in Boston where Mazzulla was selected by the front office. This feels like Giannis had the strongest voice there. The organization went behind him, and they didn't necessarily have the full support beyond, hey, this is just what our player wants. Now you look at on the floor, their defense was bad. The defense was bad. Their strength of schedule was the easiest schedule in the league, and they've been blown out by the Utah Jazz. They've been blown out by the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then subsequently, they will go and blow out the Boston Celtics on national TV to the point that the Celtics starters are sitting to start the second half of games. That shows you the firepower. And if we're going to point to Doc Rivers, who was a quote-unquote consultant after the in-season tournament, Doc Rivers didn't walk in there himself. Somebody else had to bring him in there, okay? Someone else had to ask him for his counsel, okay? All right, cool. Usually, I don't think they brought Doc to tell them something that they didn't feel like they already knew, okay? Doc wasn't going to go in there and observe something and say, hey, you guys are doing it wrong. They literally brought him in there as a matter of seemingly a confirmation bias. You know what confirmation bias is, right? Because we are people of first impression. We know what we know, we know what we observe, and then we find ways to confirm it through other voices or other outside evidence. And the other outside evidence was Doc Rivers. I will say this about Doc Rivers walking into this situation. He has failed to bring a title to the Clippers. He failed to elevate the Philadelphia 76ers over the hump. And some of that will lay directly at his feet, but not all. With the Clippers, your two main stars, you had to worry about one of them choking and one of them being healthy. And Philadelphia, you had to worry about both of your stars choking and maybe one of them not being healthy. I don't think you have to worry about in Milwaukee, both of your stars showing up to play.
That's a good point.
We've seen Dame Lillard in great moments. We've seen Giannis put up a 50 ball in a clinching game of the NBA Finals. So I'm not worried about Doc with those guys. I think Doc will go in and he will set a hierarchy and he will get some structure with that defense. I don't think he's necessarily a great defensive coach, but I do think they will set more of a structure that was not present and provide some leadership that maybe Adrian Griffin did not feel like he knew how to assert himself at the right times, being a rookie coach for the first time in his career. It's a lot going on here. And I just think we're gonna accuse Doc Rivers of dirty macking. We're gonna accuse Doc of stabbing him in the front. I don't know if that necessarily happened. I just think that the Bucks were off of Adrian Griffin really, really early. Because to be 30-13 and to fire a coach, that means that you're seeing things, you're hearing things that don't jive with the record.
Hey, thank you for watching Brother from Another. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do that now. Don't forget you can catch us 3 to 4 weekdays on PeacockTV.com and on Sirius XM Channel 85.